In the heart of Umuaka, a small village surrounded by hills, lived a woman whose beauty was the talk of the entire land. Her name was Amaka, meaning beautiful. She was a mystery, someone no man could resist. But it wasn't just her beauty that captivated the villagers. It was her most noticeable feature, her backside. Amaka's backside was legendary. Full, rounded, and perfectly shaped, it was like the earth itself had molded her with extra care. As she walked, her backside swayed with a rhythm that seemed almost magical, like a dance that only she could perform. Each step she took made her hips move in a way that seemed to hypnotize everyone around her. The sway was so captivating that it could stop a conversation in mid-sentence, cause children to drop their toys, and make even the most disciplined men lose their composure. Whenever Amaka passed by, all heads would turn. It didn't matter where she was, at the market, by the river, or simply walking along the village paths. Every pair of eyes would follow her. Men would forget what they were doing, their gazes locked on her, as if drawn by an invisible force. Some would try to steal quick glances, while others openly stared, unable to look away. Even women couldn't help but admire the way she moved, though some did so with envy in their hearts. Her backside was a symbol of both beauty and power. The young men of Umuaka often whispered amongst themselves that it could make a man forget his troubles, and some even believed it had the power to bring good luck. Mothers warned their sons about her, knowing the chaos she could cause with just a glance. Fathers secretly wished their sons would win her hand, while young women watched her with a mix of admiration and jealousy. The village was full of stories about Amaka, each tale more unbelievable than the last. But Amaka was not just an object of desire. She was a woman of strength, intelligence, and kindness. Her father, Okiki, was a respected farmer, and her mother, Neka, was known for her wisdom and healing skills. Amaka had inherited her mother's kindness and her father's determination. Yet despite her good qualities, it was her backside that drew the most attention, often overshadowing her true character. Even King Ezeudo, the mighty ruler of Umuaka, was not immune to Amaka's charm. He had heard the rumors spreading through the village about a woman whose beauty was beyond compare, especially her remarkable backside that left men lusting after her. The stories were everywhere. How all the men wanted her for themselves, how they would lose their focus whenever she passed by. The tales were so widespread that even the king, surrounded by the most beautiful women in the land, couldn't help but be curious. Intrigued by these stories, King Ezeudo decided to summon Amaka to the palace. He wanted to see for himself if the rumors were true, though a part of him doubted that any woman could be as captivating as the tales suggested. He sent his guards to bring her, and soon Amaka stood before him in the great hall. The moment King Ezeudo laid eyes on her, he realized that the rumors hadn't even done her justice. Amaka's beauty was beyond anything he had imagined. Her skin was flawless, her eyes bright and intelligent, but it was her backside that truly took his breath away. Full, rounded, and perfectly shaped, it moved with a rhythm that seemed almost otherworldly. The way her hips swayed as she walked left him completely mesmerized. He could see now why men lost themselves in her presence, why they couldn't tear their eyes away from her. King Ezeudo found himself immediately captivated, his heart pounding in his chest as he watched her. The stories had not prepared him for the reality of Amaka's beauty and perfect shape. Her backside in particular seemed to have a life of its own, commanding attention with every step she took. It was as if the very air around her shifted to follow her movements, drawing him in, leaving him powerless to resist. As she stood before him, Amaka's presence filled the room, and King Ezeudo could hardly speak. His mind raced, trying to find the right words, but all he could think about was how he must have her, how he could not let her slip away. The desire that had been sparked by the rumors now burned fiercely within him. No longer was Amaka just a figure of stories. She was real, and she was even more enchanting than he could have ever imagined. King Ezeudo already had a wife and several concubines, but none of them stirred the same desire within him as Amaka did. He wanted more than just to take her as another concubine. He wanted to make her his second wife, to satisfy his growing lust. The thought of Amaka in his palace, of possessing her beauty and making her his own, consumed him. The king knew that to pursue her in this way would cause a scandal. His people valued tradition, and bringing another wife into the palace, especially one as coveted as Amaka, would not go unnoticed. Yet his desire was so strong that he could barely focus on his duties. The council of elders noticed his distraction, and whispers began to spread throughout the palace. Even Queen Oluchi, the king's first wife, sensed something was wrong. She had always felt secure in her position, but the way Ezeudo's eyes followed Amaka filled her with fear. She knew that if the king set his mind on something, he would stop at nothing to get it. The king was torn between his duty to his people and his lust for Amaka. He tried to distract himself with other matters, hunting, council meetings, and royal duties, but nothing could cool the fire burning inside him. His mind kept drifting back to Amaka, to the way her backside swayed, to the way it seemed to command the attention of everyone around her. It wasn't long before he decided that he must have her, no matter the cost. But how could he, a king, approach a woman like Amaka without causing an uproar? The thought of her being with another man filled him with jealousy, and the idea that he could lose her to someone else made him even more determined to make her his. But he knew he had to be careful. He couldn't simply take her as a concubine. That would cause a scandal that could shake the very foundations of his kingdom. No, he had to make her his second wife, giving her a position of honor, yet still satisfying his overwhelming desire. As the king plotted, his obsession with Amaka grew. He would lie awake at night, imagining her beside him, her body close to his, her backside within reach. The thought drove him mad with desire, and he knew that he couldn't wait much longer. He had to act, and he had to do it soon. King Ezeudo's mind raced with plans, each one more daring than the last. He would find a way to make Amaka his second wife, and when he did, he would finally quench the burning desire that consumed him. Amaka's beauty and her remarkable backside had become the most talked about subject in the village of Umuaka. Men of all ages and from every corner of the village were drawn to her like moths to a flame. Her presence in the market or along the village paths would instantly turn heads. Conversations would halt, and eyes would follow her every movement. Yet despite the attention and the power she had over men, Amaka remained humble and kind. She was well aware of the effect she had on people, but she never let it change who she was. Amaka was not one to flaunt her beauty or use it to manipulate others. Instead, she focused on helping those in need, just as her mother Neka had taught her. Whether it was assisting with the harvest, caring for the sick, or offering a kind word to someone in distress, Amaka was always there, her heart full of compassion. The villagers respected her not just for her beauty, but for her character, though the men could never fully detach their admiration from her physical appearance. But the men of Umuaka were not the only ones captivated by Amaka. As King Ezeudo's obsession with her grew, he became increasingly determined to make her his. He had summoned her to the palace several times under various pretexts, each time trying to win her over. He showered her with gifts, beautiful fabrics, intricate jewelry, and rare spices, hoping to impress her and soften her heart towards him. However, Amaka was not swayed by wealth or power. She had always believed in love and had dreamed of marrying a man who loved her deeply, just as she would love him. Amaka did not want to be a concubine or a numbered wife in a king's harem. She wanted to be the only wife, cherished and respected, just as her mother had been to her father. The thought of being one among many in the palace, even with the title of a second wife, did not appeal to her. She wanted a love that was true and mutual, not one born out of desire or possession. When King Ezeudo expressed his desire to make her his second wife, Amaka politely but firmly declined. She explained that while she was honored by his attention, she could not accept a marriage that did not align with her values and beliefs. She wanted a life where love was the foundation, not power or obligation. The king, unused to being refused, especially by a woman, was both surprised and frustrated by her rejection. He had never encountered a woman who would turn down such an offer, and it only fueled his desire for her even more. Ezeudo was a man who was accustomed to getting what he wanted, and the fact that Amaka resisted him made her all the more alluring. He saw her refusal not as a final decision but as a challenge, something to be overcome. Over the following weeks, King Ezeudo made several more attempts to win Amaka over. He increased his gifts, offering her land, servants, and a place of honor at the palace. He even went so far as to promise that if she became his wife, she would be the most favored of all, her voice holding more power than even his first wife, Queen Oluchi. But no matter what he offered, Amaka remained steadfast in her decision. She gently but firmly told the king that she could not be with someone she did not love, no matter the wealth or status that came with it. Amaka's heart yearned for a simple life filled with love, where she would be valued not just for her beauty but for who she was as a person. She explained to the king that love could not be bought or forced, and that she would rather remain unmarried than enter into a marriage without love. King Ezeudo, though frustrated, could not help but admire Amaka's integrity and strength. Yet, his obsession with her only grew stronger. He found himself thinking of her constantly, devising new ways to win her over. But deep down, he knew that no matter what he did, Amaka would never be his in the way he wanted. The king's attempts to possess her were driven by lust and desire, not the kind of love that Amaka sought. And this realization only deepened his frustration and longing. As the king's attempts to win Amaka over continued to fail, she sought solace in the simple pleasures of her daily life. She found peace in her routine, tending to the crops, helping her mother with the household chores, and gathering herbs in the forest. It was during one of these quiet moments in the forest that Amaka's life took an unexpected turn. One day, as she wandered deeper into the forest in search of rare herbs, Amaka heard a rustling in the bushes. Startled, she moved closer to see what it was. To her surprise, she found a man lying on the ground, injured and unconscious. He was dressed in tattered clothes, his face covered in dirt and blood. Despite his disheveled appearance, there was something striking about his features, something that drew Amaka's attention. Without hesitation, Amaka knelt beside him and checked his injuries. The man had a deep gash on his leg, likely from an animal attack, and his body was burning with fever. Amaka knew she couldn't leave him there. She quickly tore a piece of her wrapper and bandaged his wound before trying to wake him. The man groaned in pain but did not regain consciousness. Realizing that he needed more help than she could provide in the forest, Amaka decided to bring him back to her home. She struggled to support his weight as she helped him to his feet, his tall and muscular frame making the task difficult. Slowly, she guided him through the forest, her heart pounding with both fear and determination. She didn't know who this man was or where he came from, but she couldn't leave him to die. When Amaka finally reached her home, her mother, Neka, took over. Neka was known in the village for her healing skills, and she immediately set to work on the stranger's wounds. Amaka watched as her mother cleaned and dressed the wound, her worry growing as the man's condition remained critical. They kept him warm and gave him herbal remedies to fight the fever, hoping that he would recover. Over the next few days, Amaka spent much of her time by the stranger's side, tending to his needs and watching for any sign of improvement. As he lay unconscious, Amaka found herself wondering about him. Who was he? Where did he come from? And what had brought him to their forest? There was something mysterious about him, something that piqued her curiosity. Finally, after several days, the stranger began to show signs of recovery. His fever broke, and he started to regain consciousness. The first time he opened his eyes, they met Amaka's, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. There was something in his gaze that stirred something deep within her, a connection she couldn't quite explain. "Where am I?" the man finally asked, his voice weak and hoarse. "You're in Umuaka," Amaka replied gently. "I found you in the forest. You were badly injured, but you're safe now." The man tried to sit up but winced in pain, his hand instinctively going to the bandage on his leg. Amaka quickly moved to help him, adjusting the pillows behind him to make him more comfortable. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "You saved my life. I don't even know how to repay you." "There's no need for that," Amaka said with a warm smile. "I'm just glad you're safe. My name is Amaka. What's yours?" The man hesitated for a moment before answering. "Obina," he said. "My name is Obina." As the days passed, Obina's strength slowly returned. He was grateful to Amaka and her family for saving his life, and he did his best to repay their kindness by helping around the house as soon as he was able. Despite his initial weakness, it soon became clear that Obina was a man of great strength and character. He was not only handsome with a perfect manly body, he was also gentle and kind, always thanking Amaka for her help and never once making her feel uncomfortable. Unlike the men of Umuaka, Obina did not stare at her or make lustful comments. Instead, he listened to her stories and laughed at her jokes. There was a warmth in his eyes that made Amaka feel safe, something she hadn't felt in a long time. As they spent more time together, Amaka found herself drawn to Obina in a way she had never experienced before. He was different from any man she had ever met, kind, thoughtful, and respectful. Amaka's feelings for Obina began to deepen. She found herself thinking about him even when they were apart, wondering what he was doing, and looking forward to their next conversation. She knew it was too soon to call it love, but she couldn't deny that there was something special between them. Yet, as much as Amaka was drawn to Obina, she also knew that her life was not her own. The king's obsession with her had not waned, and she was constantly reminded that her future was uncertain. She had rejected the king's advances, but she knew he would not give up easily. The thought of becoming one of his wives, even his second wife, filled her with dread. But as she spent more time with Obina, she began to realize that she could never be happy in such a life. She wanted to marry for love, an honest man who would love her not because of her beauty or her curvaceous backside, but because of who she was. Obina, for his part, seemed to share her feelings, though he never said it outright. There was a quiet understanding between them, a connection that went beyond words. But as much as Amaka enjoyed their time together, she couldn't shake the feeling that Obinna was hiding something. There was a mystery to him that both intrigued and worried her. One day, as they sat together under the shade of a large tree, Obinna turned to her with a serious expression. "Amaka," he began, his voice hesitant. "There's something I need to tell you." Amaka's heart skipped a beat. She had sensed that this moment was coming. Is he married? He is too handsome to be single. She was scared this would be the end of their time together, but she wasn't sure she was ready for it. "What is it, Obinna?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Obinna looked down at his hands, as if gathering his thoughts. "I haven't been entirely honest with you," he admitted. "There are things about me that you don't know, things I've kept hidden. But before I tell you, I need you to know that everything I've said to you, everything we've shared, has been real. You're the kindest, most beautiful person I've ever met, and I don't want to lose that." Amaka felt a lump form in her throat. She had grown so fond of Obinna, and the thought of him keeping secrets from her was painful, but she also knew that everyone had their own burdens to bear, their own pasts to keep. "Obinna," she said softly, "whatever it is, you can tell me. I promise I'll listen." Obinna nodded, his eyes meeting hers. "Thank you, Amaka," he said. "But before I tell you everything, I need to know something. Do you have feelings for me? Because I need to know if what I'm about to say will change anything between us." Amaka's heart raced as she realized the weight of his question. She had been careful not to show her feelings too openly, but now that the moment had come, she knew she couldn't hide them any longer. "Obinna," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I do care for you. I've never met anyone like you, and I can't deny that I've grown to feel something for you. But whatever it is you need to tell me, I promise I won't judge you." Obinna smiled, a look of relief washing over his face. "Thank you, Amaka," he said. "There's something important you need to know about me, but please give me a little more time. I promise I'll tell you everything soon." Amaka nodded, her heart still pounding in her chest. She didn't know what Obinna was hiding, but she trusted him. and whatever it was, she knew that her feelings for him wouldn't change. As Obinna regained his strength, it became clear to Amaka that his time in Umuaka was drawing to a close. His wounds had healed, and the color had returned to his cheeks. Each day he grew stronger, and Amaka knew that soon he would be well enough to return to wherever he had come from. Though she cherished the time they spent together, Amaka couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness creeping in. She knew that Obinna's stay in the village was temporary, and the thought of him leaving filled her with a quiet sorrow. Obinna hadn't revealed much about his past or where he came from, and Amaka respected his privacy. She didn't want to pry into his life, knowing that everyone had their own burdens to carry. She believed that if Obinna wanted to share more about himself, he would do so when he felt ready. For now, she was content with the connection they had built, even if it was shrouded in mystery. But it wasn't just Amaka who noticed Obinna's presence in the village. As much as the men were drawn to Amaka for her remarkable backside, the women of Umuaka were equally captivated by the handsome stranger who was often seen by her side. Obinna's tall, muscular build, combined with his kind and gentle demeanor, made him the subject of many whispered conversations among the village women. They admired his strength, his intelligence, and the way he treated Amaka with such respect and care. The sight of Obinna and Amaka together became a common one in the village, and soon rumors began to spread. People wondered about the nature of their relationship, with some speculating that Obinna might be the one to finally win Amaka's heart. The women in particular were curious about the man who seemed so different from the others, a man who had captured the attention of the most desired woman in Umuaka. It wasn't long before these rumors reached the ears of King Ezeudo. Already consumed by his obsession with Amaka, the news that she was spending time with another man drove him to the brink of madness. The idea that someone else might take her away from him was unbearable, and his jealousy turned into a burning rage. Determined to put an end to this, King Ezeudo summoned Amaka and her parents to the palace. The message was delivered with an urgency that made Okiki and Neka uneasy, but they had no choice but to comply. Amaka too felt a sense of dread as she prepared to face the king, knowing that his obsession with her had reached dangerous levels. King Ezeudo sat on his throne, his eyes cold and hard as he watched them approach. Amaka could feel the weight of his gaze on her, and she braced herself for what was to come. "Amaka," the king began, his voice filled with barely contained anger. "I have heard troubling news. It seems that you have been seen in the company of a stranger, a man who has no place in this village. You know very well that I have offered you a position of great honor as my second wife, yet you continue to defy me. What is this that I hear?" Amaka stood tall, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that this moment would come, but it didn't make it any easier. "Your Majesty," she replied, her voice steady. "I am grateful for the honor you have shown me, but I have told you before that I cannot accept your offer. I seek a marriage based on love, not power. The man you speak of is a friend, someone I have grown to care for, but my heart is my own, and I will give it only to the one I truly love." King Ezeudo's eyes narrowed as he turned to Okiki. "And you, Okiki, have you allowed this in your house? Have you forgotten your duty to your king?" Okiki stepped forward, his voice firm but respectful. "Your Majesty, I have not forgotten my duty, but my duty as a father is to ensure the happiness of my daughter. Amaka has always been strong-willed and knows what she wants. I cannot force her into a marriage she does not desire. She must choose her own path." The king's face darkened with fury. He had expected resistance, but the calm defiance of Amaka and her father only fueled his anger. "You dare to defy me?" he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "You forget your place, Okiki. You forget that I am the king, and what I desire, I take." "Your Majesty," Okiki replied, his voice unwavering, "I have always served you faithfully, but I cannot give you my daughter's heart. That is hers to give, and hers alone." Ezeudo's hands clenched the arms of his throne, his knuckles turning white. He could feel his control slipping, his patience worn thin by their continued defiance. The thought of losing Amaka to another man was unbearable, and the knowledge that this stranger had won her affection drove him to the edge. "Enough!" the king roared, rising from his throne. "I will not be made a fool in my own kingdom. If you will not give her to me willingly, then I will take what is mine." The room fell silent, the weight of the king's threat hanging heavy in the air. Amaka's heart raced, but she refused to back down. She had always believed in standing up for herself, in fighting for what she believed was right, and she would not let the king's threats sway her. "Your Majesty," Amaka said, her voice calm but firm, "I will not be taken by force. You may be the king, but my heart is my own. I beg you to respect my wishes, for I will not marry without love." King Ezeudo stared at her, his chest heaving with barely contained rage. He knew that he was at a crossroads. He could use his power to force her into submission, to make her his second wife against her will. But he also knew that doing so would come at a great cost. The respect of his people, the stability of his kingdom, and even his own honor were at stake. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the king spoke. "Leave my sight," he said, his voice cold and hard. "But know this, Amaka, this is not over. I will have what I desire, and no man, not even your father, will stand in my way." Amaka, Okiki, and Neka bowed respectfully before turning to leave the palace. As they walked away, Amaka felt a mixture of relief and fear. She had stood her ground, but she knew that the king's obsession with her was far from over. The storm was coming, and she could only hope that she would have the strength to weather it. As they made their way back to the village, Amaka's thoughts turned to Obinna. She knew that their time together was running out, and she couldn't shake the feeling that their connection, whatever it was, would soon be tested in ways she couldn't yet imagine. After returning from the palace, Amaka felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. The encounter with King Ezeudo had shaken her, and the fear of what he might do next gnawed at her heart. She knew she had to confide in Obina, to tell him the full extent of the king's obsession and the danger that loomed over them. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the village, Amaka and Obina sat together outside her home. The air was cool, and the sounds of the evening filled the space between them. Amaka took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves before speaking. "Obina," she began, her voice soft but serious. "There's something I need to tell you. Something that's been weighing on me ever since we left the palace." Obina turned to her, his eyes filled with concern. "What is it, Amaka? You can tell me anything." Amaka hesitated for a moment, then spoke. "The king, he's obsessed with me. He has been for some time now. He wants to make me his second wife, and he's made it clear that he won't take no for an answer. My father has refused him, but I'm afraid that won't be enough. If I don't do something soon, the king might issue a decree to force me to marry him." Obina's expression darkened, and a flash of anger crossed his face. "That cannot happen," he said firmly. "Amaka, you deserve to marry a man you love, not someone who sees you as a possession." Amaka looked down, her heart heavy with the fear that had been building inside her. "Obina, I care for you. I've grown to love you, but I'm afraid. If I accept my feelings for you, if I let myself love you openly, the king might see it as a threat. I fear for your life because of his obsession with me. My backside, which has drawn so much attention, is now bringing me nothing but distress. I never wanted this. I never wanted to be the cause of so much trouble." Obina reached out and gently took her hand in his. "Amaka," he said softly, "I understand your fears, but you don't have to face this alone. I've been wanting to tell you how I feel for some time now, but I held back because I didn't want to put you in danger. But now, hearing what you've been going through, I can't keep it to myself any longer." He paused, his eyes searching hers before he continued. "Amaka, I love you. From the moment you saved me in the forest, I knew there was something special about you. You're strong, kind, and beautiful in every way. I've fallen in love with you, and I want to be with you, not just as a friend, but as your partner, your husband." Amaka's heart swelled with emotion at his words, but the fear still lingered. "Obina, I love you too," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But the king, He's powerful. If he finds out about us, I'm afraid of what he might do to you. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of me." Obina squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Amaka, don't worry about the king. I won't let anything happen to you, and I'm not afraid of him. You see, there's something you should know. While the king of Umuaka is powerful here, there's only one man who could truly stop his obsession. Someone even more powerful." Amaka looked at him, confused. "Who could that be?" she asked. Obina smiled and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. "The king of Aniocha," he said. "Aniocha is a large and powerful kingdom, much larger than Umuaka. The village of Umuaka, like many others, sends tribute to Aniocha because no one, not even King Ezeudo, would dare defy the king of Aniocha. He is a man of great power and influence, and if he were to intervene, even Ezeudo would have to step back." Amaka's eyes widened in surprise. She had heard of the king of Aniocha, of course, but she had never imagined that he could have any connection to her situation. "But how could we possibly involve the king of Aniocha?" she asked. "We are just simple villagers. Why would he help us?" Obina's smile widened, a knowing look in his eyes. "Let's just say that the king of Aniocha has a vested interest in what happens here," he said cryptically. "Trust me, Amaka. Things will be okay. You don't need to live in fear. We'll find a way to be together, and I promise you, the king of Umuaka will not harm us." Amaka's heart was torn between hope and fear. She wanted to believe Obina, to trust in his words and his love, but the shadow of King Ezeudo's obsession loomed large. Still, Obina's confidence and calm demeanor gave her some comfort, and she allowed herself to lean into his reassurance. Obina pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her. "Everything will be fine," he whispered into her ear. "I'll protect you, Amaka. I won't let anyone take you away from me." Amaka rested her head against his chest, letting the warmth of his embrace soothe her troubled mind. For the first time in days, she felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps with Obina by her side, she could find a way out of this nightmare. But as the night grew darker, she couldn't help but wonder what the future held, and whether their love could truly withstand the king's growing obsession. As the days passed, the love between Amaka and Obinna continued to blossom. They spent many quiet moments together, away from the prying eyes of the village, where they could simply enjoy each other's company. Whether sitting by the river, walking through the forest, or just talking under the shade of a tree, their bond grew stronger with each passing day. There was a peacefulness in their relationship that Amaka had never experienced before, a deep connection that went beyond words. Amaka's parents, Okiki and Neka, who had always been loving and kind, noticed the change in their daughter. They saw how happy she was with Obinna and how he treated her with respect and care. Unlike many parents who might have been concerned about wealth and status, Okiki and Aneka valued their daughter's happiness above all else. They could see that Obinna was a good man, and they accepted him into their family with open hearts. It didn't matter to them that Obinna didn't have riches or land. What mattered was that he made their daughter smile and treated her with the love she deserved. However, the villagers of Umuaka were not so accepting. Many couldn't understand why Amaka, the most desired woman in the village, would choose a man like Obinna, who had no wealth or standing. The men, who had once been captivated by Amaka's backside and rich endowment, now mocked her choice. They whispered among themselves that despite all her beauty and allure, she had ended up falling for a poor man. To them it was a waste, a squandering of her gifts on someone who couldn't provide for her in the way they believed she deserved. The women of the village were no kinder. They couldn't understand why Amaka would turn down the king's proposal, which would have guaranteed her a life of luxury and security. She should have accepted the king, they would say, shaking their heads in disbelief. At least then she would have had a secure future, even if she wasn't the only wife. The gossip was relentless. 2 young maidens were overheard one day, their voices tinged with jealousy as they discussed Amaka's choice. "I don't understand her," one said, her tone dripping with disdain. "Even if Obinna is handsome, his good looks won't put food on the table. If it were me, I'd rather be the king's 5th wife than marry a poor man." The other maiden nodded in agreement. "Exactly. What's the use of being the only woman in his life if he can't provide for her?" She could have had everything with the king, riches, status, security. But instead she chose a man who has nothing. It doesn't make sense. Even Amaka's best friend, Ifeoma, who had always supported her, came to her one day with a look of concern on her face. "Amaka," she began gently. "I know you love Obina, and I can see that he makes you happy. But have you really thought about what your life will be like with him? Love is important, but it doesn't put food on the table. Obina's six-pack might look good, but it won't fill your stomach." Amaka sighed, feeling the weight of her friend's words. "Feoma, I know Obina isn't rich, and I know life with him might not be easy. But I love him. He's kind, he respects me, and I know he'll always be there for me. I'd rather struggle with him by my side than live in a palace without love." Ifeoma looked at her friend with pity. "I just want what's best for you, Amaka. The king may have many wives, but he could give you a life of comfort. You wouldn't have to worry about where your next meal is coming from or how you'll survive. Are you sure you're making the right choice?" Amaka met her friend's gaze, her resolve unwavering. "I know this is the right choice for me. The king might offer security, but he can't offer me love. I'd rather be poor with Obina, knowing that I'm the only woman in his life, than be one of many in a palace where I'd always be second place. I want a marriage built on love, not on wealth or status." Ifeoma sighed, realizing that she couldn't change Amaka's mind. "I hope you're right, Amaka. I really do. Just know that I'm here for you no matter what happens." As Ifeoma left, Amaka felt a mix of emotions: love for Obina, fear of the future, and frustration at the judgment she faced from the villagers. It wasn't easy to go against what everyone else believed was right, but she knew in her heart that she couldn't choose a life without love. That evening, as Amaka and Obina sat together under the stars, she shared with him the doubts that had been planted by the villagers' gossip. She told him of the things people were saying, about how they mocked her for choosing him, and how even her best friend had tried to convince her to marry the king instead. Obinna listened quietly, his heart aching for Amaka and the pain she was going through. When she finished speaking, he took her hands in his and looked into her eyes. "Amaka, I'm sorry you've had to hear such things. I know it must be difficult, but I promise you, we'll get through this together. I may not have wealth or status, but I have my love for you, and I will do everything in my power to make you happy." Amaka smiled through her tears, feeling comforted by his words. "I know, Obinna. I believe in you, and I believe in us. But it's hard when everyone around me thinks I'm making a mistake." Obinna pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "Let them say what they will. We know what we have, and that's all that matters. I won't let anything come between us, and I'll work hard to provide for you, even if it means starting from nothing. We'll build our life together and we'll do it with love." Amaka leaned into his embrace, feeling the warmth of his love surround her. Despite the doubts and the gossip, she knew that she had made the right choice. She loved Obinna with all her heart, and she was willing to face whatever challenges came their way. Together they would prove that love was worth more than all the riches in the world. The love between Amaka and Obinna had grown into something undeniable, something pure and strong that could no longer be kept secret. After much thought and many quiet conversations with Obinna, Amaka decided to take a bold step. One evening, as they sat together in their humble home, Amaka declared to her parents that she wanted to marry Obinna. Okeki and Neka, who had long seen the love in their daughter's eyes, were not surprised. They had come to admire Obinna for the way he treated Amaka, with kindness and respect, and they knew that her happiness was tied to him. Despite the gossip and the whispers that filled the village, they supported Amaka's decision wholeheartedly. "Amaka, my daughter," Okiki said, his voice filled with emotion. "If Obinna is the man you love, then you have our blessing. We have always wanted nothing but your happiness, and we can see that Obinna makes you happy. The path you have chosen may not be easy, but it is your path, and we will stand by you." Neka nodded in agreement, her eyes shining with pride. "Love is a rare and precious thing, Amaka. It's not something to be taken lightly or traded for riches. You have our blessing, and we will help you in any way we can." Amaka's heart swelled with gratitude and love for her parents. She knew that their support was a gift, one that many in her situation might not have. She thanked them with tears in her eyes, feeling more certain than ever that she had made the right choice. But the news of Amaka's decision quickly spread through the village, and it wasn't long before it reached the ears of King Ezeudo. The idea that the most desirable woman in the village, the woman with the legendary backside, would marry a poor, unknown man instead of becoming his second wife, filled him with rage. The thought of losing Amaka to another man was too much for him to bear. The king's anger boiled over, and he knew he had to act quickly to stop the marriage. He could not let Amaka, the woman he obsessed over for so long, slip through his fingers. Without hesitation, he ordered his guards to capture both Amaka and Obina. His plan was simple. He would have Obina locked away and Amaka would be brought to the palace, where he would make her his wife by force if necessary. The king's orders were carried out with ruthless efficiency. A group of heavily armed guards was dispatched to capture Amaka and Obina, and the entire village buzzed with the news. Everyone knew that the king had finally taken drastic action, and fear spread through the village like wildfire. As the guards approached, Obinna sensed the danger. He knew that King Ezeudo would not give up easily, and that their love had put them in the king's crosshairs. When the guards arrived at their home, Obinna was ready. He stood between Amaka and the guards, his heart pounding with both fear and determination. "Stand aside, peasant!" one of the guards barked, his hand on the hilt of his sword. "We have orders from the king. You are to be taken into custody, and the woman is to be brought to the palace." Obinna's jaw tightened, and he squared his shoulders, ready to defend the woman he loved. "I will not let you take her," he said, his voice calm but firm. "She is not yours to take, and I will fight anyone who tries to harm her." The guards sneered at his defiance, drawing their weapons as they advanced. But Obinna was no ordinary man. Though he had kept much of his past hidden, his skills in combat were unmatched. He fought with a precision and strength that took the guards by surprise, his movements swift and deadly. One by one, the guards fell, unable to match his skill and determination. Amaka watched in awe and fear as Obinna fought off their attackers. She had known he was strong, but she had never seen him like this, fierce, protective, and unyielding. But as the last of the guards fell, both she and Obinna knew that this was only the beginning. The king would not stop until he had them both in his grasp. "We can't stay here," Obinna said, breathing heavily as he wiped the sweat from his brow. "The king will send more men, and next time they'll be ready. We need to leave the village, Amaka. We need to go somewhere he can't reach us." Amaka nodded, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and resolve. "But where can we go?" "The king's power extends far beyond Umuaka." Obinna took her hands in his, looking into her eyes with determination. "There is one place where the king's power means nothing. Aniocha. The king of Aniocha is the only one who can stop King Ezeudo. We must flee to Aniocha, where we will be safe. The village of Umuaka sends tribute to Aniocha. No one, not even Ezeudo, would dare defy the king of Aniocha." Amaka's mind raced as she considered his words. Aniocha was a large and powerful kingdom, far beyond the reach of Umuaka. It was a place where they could start a new life, away from the king's obsession and the judgment of the villagers. But the journey would be long and dangerous, and there was no guarantee of safety. Still, she knew that they had no other choice. "Let's go," she said, her voice filled with determination. "We'll go to Aniocha and find safety there. We'll start a new life, away from all of this." Obinna nodded, and together they quickly gathered what little they could carry. With one last look at the village they had called home, they set off into the night, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that they might never return. As they fled into the darkness, the stars above them seemed to shine a little brighter, as if offering a glimmer of hope for the journey ahead. After days of travel, Amaka and Obinna finally arrived at the gates of Aniocha. The journey had been long and exhausting, but their determination to escape King Ezeudo's grasp had kept them going. As they approached the outskirts of the kingdom, Amaka's weariness began to fade, replaced by awe and wonder at the sight before her. Aniocha was unlike anything she had ever seen. The kingdom was vast, bustling with life and energy, The roads were wide and well-paved, lined with towering trees and vibrant flowers. As they neared the palace, Amaka's breath caught in her throat. The palace was enormous, its walls rising high into the sky, adorned with intricate carvings and golden accents. Beautiful gardens stretched out in every direction, filled with blooming flowers and fountains that sparkled in the sunlight. Amaka could hardly believe her eyes. She had heard stories of the grandeur of Aniocha, but seeing it in person was beyond anything she could have imagined. "This place. It's incredible," she whispered, her eyes wide with amazement. Obina smiled at her reaction, but said nothing as they continued towards the palace gates. As they approached, something unexpected happened. The guards at the gate straightened up, their expressions shifting from suspicion to recognition. To Amaka's surprise, they bowed deeply and greeted Obina with respect. "Welcome back, Your Majesty," one of the guards said, his voice filled with reverence. Amaka looked at Obina in confusion, but before she could say anything, he dismissed the guards with a quick wave of his hand. "Thank you," he said simply, his tone authoritative yet warm. "You may return to your posts." The guards obeyed without question, and Obina continued to lead Amaka through the palace grounds. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of what she had just witnessed. Why had the guards addressed Obina as Your Majesty? And why had they bowed to him? None of it made sense, but Amaka held her questions, trusting that the answers would come soon. As they entered the grand hall of the palace, Amaka was struck by the sheer opulence of the space. The floors were made of polished marble, and the walls were adorned with magnificent tapestries depicting scenes of Aniocha's history. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm golden light over the room. It was a place fit for a king, and Amaka couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary was about to happen. Obina stopped in the center of the grand hall, turning to face Amaka. He took her hand in his expression serious yet filled with affection. "Amaka," he began, his voice soft but steady. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." Amaka's heart pounded in her chest as she looked into his eyes. "What is it, Obina? What's going on?" Obina took a deep breath, his grip on her hand tightening slightly. "Amaka, I haven't been entirely honest with you. The truth is, I am not just a simple man from a neighboring village. I am the king of Aniocha." Amaka's eyes widened in shock, her breath catching in her throat. "The king," she whispered, her mind reeling from the revelation. You're the king of Aniocha?" Obinna nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "Yes. I inherited the throne not long ago, after the passing of my father. My mother and the elders have been urging me to find a wife, presenting me with their daughters and many other women from noble families, but I wasn't interested in any of them. None of them captured my heart." He paused, searching her face for any sign of understanding before continuing. "Then I heard stories. Stories of a mesmerizing woman in Umuaka. A woman with a beauty that could captivate any man. They spoke of your big backside, Amaka, and how it had enchanted the entire village. But I didn't want to take you as a mere tribute, as some trophy to display in my court. I wanted to see for myself if you were more than just a beautiful face and figure." Amaka was too stunned to speak, her mind racing to keep up with the flood of information. The man she had come to love was not just anyone. He was a king, the ruler of one of the most powerful kingdoms in the land, and he had sought her out, not for her beauty alone, but to see the person behind the appearance. Obina continued, his voice filled with emotion. "I came to Umuaka unguarded, wanting to meet you as an ordinary man, not as a king. But fate had other plans. I was attacked on my way and left for dead in the forest. If it weren't for you, Amaka, I wouldn't be standing here today. You saved my life when you had no reason to, and from that moment, I knew you were different. You are kind, selfless, and strong, qualities that go far beyond physical beauty. From that moment, I knew I had to do everything in my power to win your heart." Obina gently cupped Amaka's face in his hands, his eyes filled with sincerity. Amaka, I want you to be my queen. Not because of your beauty or your backside, but because of who you are. I want you to be the mother of this kingdom, to stand by my side and let everyone see your kindness and grace. I love you, Amaka, and I cannot imagine my life without you. Amaka's heart swelled with a mixture of emotions, shock, disbelief, but most of all, love. She had never expected this. The man she had fallen in love with had turned out to be a king, a man who had seen her not just for her beauty but for her heart and soul. Her head spun with the enormity of it all, but one thing was clear. Her love for Obinna was real, and it had been from the start. Tears welled up in Amaka's eyes as she looked at Obinna, her voice trembling with emotion. Obinna, I don't know what to say. This is all so overwhelming, but one thing I do know is that I love you. I love you for the man you are, not for your title or your kingdom. I never imagined this, but I would be honored to be your queen. Obinna's face lit up with a smile, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. You've made me the happiest man in the world, Amaka. Together we will build a future filled with love, and nothing, not even the obsessions of a king, will ever come between us. As they stood there in the grand hall, wrapped in each other's embrace, Amaka knew that her life had changed forever. She had gone from being a simple village girl to the future queen of Aniocha, all because of the love she had found in the most unexpected of places. And as the palace walls echoed with the sound of their joy, Amaka realized that her journey had only just begun. She had found her true love, a man who saw her for who she truly was, and together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they made their way through the palace corridors, Amaka suddenly stopped in her tracks, her eyes widening in disbelief. Standing before her was a familiar face, her long-lost uncle, Uche, who had left Umuaka many years ago to seek his fortune in another land. Amaka had not seen him since she was a child, and she had often wondered what had become of him. Amaka! Uche exclaimed, his face lighting up with joy as he rushed forward to embrace her. He pulled her into a warm hug, his voice thick with emotion. I never thought I would see you again, and now you are to be the wife of our beloved king. Amaka was overwhelmed with emotion as she reunited with her uncle. It felt as though everything had come full circle, as if fate had brought them both to this moment. She could hardly believe that the uncle she had missed for so long was now one of the king's most trusted advisors. The connection made her feel even more certain that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Tears filled Amaka's eyes as she looked up at her uncle. Uncle Uche, I've missed you so much. I never imagined that we would meet again here of all places. Uche smiled warmly at her, his eyes twinkling with pride. The gods work in mysterious ways, my dear. It seems we were always destined to reunite here in Aniocha. And now, to see you as the future queen, I couldn't be more proud. Amaka felt a deep sense of gratitude and happiness as she stood there, surrounded by the people she loved. It was as if all the pieces of her life had finally fallen into place, and she knew that she was ready for the next chapter of her journey. The wedding of King Obina and Amaka was a grand event, unlike anything the kingdom of Aniocha had seen in years. Nobles and dignitaries from far and wide gathered to witness the union of their beloved king and his new queen. The palace was adorned with the finest decorations, and the celebration was filled with music, dancing, and laughter. But it wasn't the splendor of the event that made it truly special. What made the day unforgettable was the love that shone between the bride and groom. As they exchanged their vows, standing before the altar in the presence of the gods and their people, Amaka knew that she had made the right choice. She had found a man who loved her for her heart, not just for her physical beauty, and she loved him in return with all her soul. When Obinna placed the crown upon Amaka's head, officially declaring her queen of Aniocha, the crowd erupted in cheers. It was a moment of pure joy, a celebration of love that transcended wealth, power, and status. As Amaka looked into Obinna's eyes, she knew that their love was strong enough to withstand any challenge, and that they would rule together with wisdom and compassion. Word of the grand wedding quickly spread to Umuaka, and the news of Amaka's marriage to the king of Aniocha sent shockwaves through the village. The people of Umuaka, who had once mocked and scorned Amaka for her choices, were now filled with awe and respect. They realized the depth of their mistake in judging her based on her appearance and her relationship with a man they had thought to be poor. King Ezeudo, who had been so consumed by his obsession with Amaka, could only bury his head in shame. He knew that he had been blinded by lust and power, and that his actions had nearly cost him his kingdom's respect. He sent a humble delegation to Aniocha, bearing gifts and messages of apology. In the presence of King Obinna, Ezeudo bowed deeply, his voice filled with regret. "Your Majesty," Ezeudo began, "I apologize for my impudence and disrespect. I did not know who you were, and I allowed my desires to cloud my judgment. Please forgive me and accept these gifts as a token of my remorse." King Obinna, ever gracious, accepted the apology with dignity. "Let the past remain in the past, King Ezeudo," he said calmly. "What matters now is that we move forward with peace and understanding between our kingdoms. Let this be a lesson to us all that true worth is not found in wealth or power, but in the goodness of one's heart." The people of Umuaka learned a valuable lesson from the events that had transpired. They realized that Amaka's true beauty lay not in her physical appearance, but in her strength, kindness, and unwavering integrity. They understood that it was wrong to look down on those who seemed poor or unimportant, for true riches were found in character, not material wealth. Amaka's parents, Okiki and Neka, were also honored by King Obinna. They were moved to Aniocha and given a grand house near the palace, where they could live out their days in comfort and peace, surrounded by their daughter and her new family. They were filled with pride and gratitude, knowing that their daughter had found true happiness and that they had played a part in helping her achieve it. As Amaka and Obinna settled into their new life as king and queen, they ruled with fairness and compassion. Amaka's grace and kindness won the hearts of the people of Aniocha, and she quickly became beloved by all. Her story became one of legend, a tale of a woman who, despite the odds, followed her heart and found true love. In the years that followed, the kingdom of Aniocha flourished under the wise and just rule of King Obinna and Queen Amaka. Their love and partnership set an example for all, showing that true power comes not from force or wealth, but from love, respect, and the courage to do what is right. And so, Amaka, the girl from Umuaka with the mesmerizing beauty and the big backside, became the queen of Aniocha, not just for her looks, but for her heart, her strength, and her unwavering spirit.